Welcome to the STR Data Lab.
Hello and welcome to the STR Data Lab. I'm Jamie Lane, Chief Economist at AirDNA, and I'm joined today by a really special guest. We have Julie Marks, the founder and executive director for VTSTRA, the Vermont Short-Term Rental Alliance. So Julie, welcome to the show.
Jamie, it's so good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I feel like we've known each other for quite a few years now, sort of maybe going back to Verma, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Yes. Yes, I remember sitting around the room in a Vegas hotel room podcasting with some other superstars in the industry.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. And for those listening that have heard me speak at conferences, one of the things I like to end on is that sort of the biggest risks to short-term rental performance and sort of investors today and hosts is regulation. And if you're not thinking about regulation, if you're not thinking, you're not involved in how regulation is being shaped in your city, state, county, HOA, what have you, then you're more than likely going to get surprised or burned at some point in the future. So was really excited to get you on and talk about short-term rental advocacy and how people can maybe get more involved and maybe take a proactive step to getting involved in their local areas. So first off, how's the weather in Vermont?
Well, I'm really excited to be talking about this topic. It's super important for all the reasons you just mentioned. And it's a great day to be talking about it because it's, excuse me, it's wet and rainy and soggy here in Vermont right now. Our normal spring mud season is in full force.
Great. So maybe just start with how did you get involved in first short-term rentals and then short-term rental advocacy?
Yeah, well, like most people, I certainly didn't intend to wind up managing vacation rental properties or properties in general, but as life has it, it just kind of became what was needed in my life and available to me at some point in time. But I like to think that it comes naturally in a way. My father was a landlord all through my upbringing, and my mother ended up running a bed and breakfast later on in her life. And so vacation rentals are a nice marriage of the two. So I definitely come by property management, hospitality through my parents, and I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, started investing in my own little self-made property management business until the town that I was operating in decided or started talking about shutting down vacation rentals. And so that was my introduction to not only just public engagement and municipal government ongoings, but the whole vacation rental community itself.
Hmm. So at the point that you and there were sort of the musings about shutting down short-term rentals in your area, had you had any involvement in the past in sort of local politics, like gone to city council meetings, any of that?
No, no. In fact, I was dead set on being the exact opposite and staying as far away from politics as I possibly could, which makes it hilarious that, now I find myself in the state house lobbying and deep into politics. But no, I never expected, nor did I want to be involved in politics.
And maybe for those listeners and that aren't sort of familiar with how regulations for short-term rentals can sort of pop up, can you get us sort of the lay of the ground, either in your example of how sort of the start and discussion sort of started, and then how, or maybe just an example that you've seen in other cities around the country of like how the talk gets going to new regulations getting enacted to and all the fights sort of in between.
Yeah. Well, one of the big kind of eye-opening moments or realizations that I had early on was just how much gets decided on your behalf, or that in a way, decisions that are made that will affect you in rooms that you might not even be aware of, that are open to you, and conversations that are happening. And so, yeah, I was quite floored the first time I stepped into, you know, City Hall and listened to a council meeting talking about something that I knew all about. And they were talking about how to control this thing that they knew nothing about. And it was very obvious from from their conversation that they were just getting basic things wrong. And that's because they didn't have any data or information or any person in their conversation who was an insider, was a stakeholder, was an expert. And that just kind of blew my mind. And I think that the real tipping point for when I realized, wow, like we need to do something about this. And like I mean like the collective we of everybody who is relying on this industry, is when our state house and our legislature started having these same conversations. And again, there was nobody representing our perspective. And I just couldn't believe that, for an industry that has been around since the 40s and 50s, that there wasn't already a community out there or a voice representing, and there wasn't this information about how it all works and about its impact and its importance in our economy. And so that was really the moment for me where I was like, okay, enough. If nobody's out there, then I guess I'll be that person.
And so from you deciding that you're going to be that person, like what were the next steps of sort of setting up the Vermont Short-Term Rental Alliance?
Yeah, well, it kind of snowballed really quickly, and organically, to be honest. The very first thing I did was actually write an opinion piece, and went around to all the local papers in my state and tried to find anybody who would publish it, and finally found one person, and that published around COVID times, and it was called, I think, "Why Short-Term Rentals Aren't So Bad." And it got picked up by a little group called Rent Responsibly, and they reached out to me, and that was the beginning of my relationship with Rent Responsibly and all the wonderful advocates who are in that organization, really assisting and aiding local groups to set up and form and get organized. So, yeah, that was really the turning point. And you know, built a website. I've always had this kind of obsession with building websites. I think like as a serial entrepreneur, I've, started and stopped a million different types of businesses, and each one comes with its own website. So, of course, when I got all fired up about vacation rental advocacy, the first thing I did was make a website and start a petition. And so, yeah, those things combined really propelled this issue into the spotlight. And within 3 weeks, we had over 600 people signed up locally in support of what we were doing. So we knew we were onto something.
Yeah. So with the Vermont group, like what does that community look like? Like what is the size? Like is it professional managers? Is it individual hosts? Is it like who's actually part of that community?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question because who is the vacation rental community is a conversation that I've been hearing evolving over the past many years since getting involved. Traditionally, vacation rental managers would say that they're the community, but with the kind of explosion of owner managed short term rentals and smaller operators, that has drastically changed. So, what we're doing now, and our who our definition of who is our community has evolved over the years as well. And so I'm really excited. We have just recently launched new membership categories because we realized that our community is not just vacation rental managers or homeowners. It's everybody who feeds into this economy. It's the house cleaners, it's the property care folks, it's the concierge services, the designers, all of the service providers. It's the entire tourism industry who relies on that visitor economy, who is partnering with their local vacation rentals or their local homeowners to add something to that guest experience and get something in return. And so we are now including everybody who has a stake in the industry to be represented by our association and our voice in the State House.
I assume that comes with some complications though, because I at least I don't I clearly don't have the experience that you have in this, but like some of the advocacy I've seen, and different stakeholders have different interests. So like vacation rental managers sort of protecting the interest of professionals versus individuals. You've got existing operators sort of protecting their status versus new entrants being able to come in and sort of grandfathering clauses, which might help them, but sort of limit future growth going forward. Like it seems like there are a lot of, even within our own industry, a lot of small or large constituencies that are fighting for different things within their own interest. Does that make it more difficult?
Yeah, I mean, there is certainly an element of that. We really try as a statewide organization, again, like trying to represent a more comprehensive interest in vacation rental tourism broadly. We try to stay really focused on that community aspect. So it's, breaking down that competition, removing that element from the conversation is really key. And we approach advocacy much more as we need, the rising tide to lift all boats. Like this is not a zero sum game. If one person is doing better, we're all going to be doing better. And, collaboration is the key to having a robust and diverse vacation rental economy because you know, and this might be a little bit unique in our area, but it's a very boutique industry here in Vermont, and so again, diversity is just the spice of life, and it's the spice of this industry. So we love to get people together, especially who are operating near each other, and help them see like how are they different and how are they the same, and how do they stand out to one another, and how do they partner together. So, you know, while there are some obviously competing interests at times, the underlying foundation is very much one of unity, and yeah, so we kind of work from a place of community.
Yeah. And then I suspect there's groups within sort of the state cities that have been helpful, or at least asking like who have you found most helpful in terms of partnering sort of existing groups within the state, whether it's the DMOs, the Chamber of Commerce, like finding groups that are sort of aligned on sort of wanting to promote travel, tourism, wanting to promote sort of economic activity within the state. Like, I assume there's some groups that are like very, or at least partially pro short-term rentals.
Yeah, this has been one of the most exciting kind of stories of our evolution as an association. When we first came onto the scene, vacation rental tourism and all of the economic factors that go into it and are received from it kind of were invisible. They weren't, they were buried in all the data that the states were seeing, and they were buried and mixed up in all the housing data. And so nobody was really teasing that out until we came along. So honestly, the reaction we got at first to state agencies, to local nonprofits, to the local lodging associations and chambers of commerce was a little bit like reserved and pulled back. They were suspicious for sure. Um, but over the years and over time, building up that relationship, working with them to ask the questions that really needed answering to tease that vacation rental data and information out of what we're seeing. Um, fast forward 4 years later, they're coming to us for answers now. They're inviting us to the table to speak as the expert and um, the authority in this area, and so that's been really exciting to really help open up the eyes of many people into this industry. And for example, our state department of tourism is now specifically investing in and collecting and publicly presenting data related to vacation rentals, which was not being done before. And so now, we're painting a much clearer picture as to where this fits into our economy. And the same thing can be said about housing. Our local, housing agency is also uh, considering this more closely and more distinctly as it relates to housing. And so that has been extremely valuable in ways that I think are difficult to explain because it's a shift in mindset, and it's a shift in understanding.
Yeah. And the other sort of point of contention I've heard and seen is that not all regulation is bad regulation. Like for an industry that has been operating maybe in the shadows or just not had as much sort of visibility sort of shed on it. And there are in many ways like good types of regulation and ways to promote the industry, sort of guest safety, community well-being, so community travel or sustainable travel. So how do you think about sort of good regulation versus bad regulation?
Yeah, that's really important. A lot of our, I think, success or, the reason why we've been able to establish such good relationships and partnerships with other organizations and agencies is that we do not want to be known as advocating for no regulation. We are not anti-regulation. We're not going to show up at, in front of City Hall with like picket signs and, say hands off, like leave us alone. We lead with responsible and reasonable regulation solutions. So we ask for standards around safety. We ask for parity in guest safety that's equivalent to tenant safety in the rental housing marketplace. We look at other type of community impacts and nuisances that can be easily prevented and mitigated through local ordinances such as noise ordinances, trash ordinances, alarm ordinances, light, parking. A lot of these kind of controls are already in place, and so we always recommend the further enforcement and application to vacation rental activities to control those any type of neighborhood disturbances. Um, and we also, that applies where Vermont is a very rural environment. And so we are very cognizant of our natural surroundings and the wildlife that we share the space with. And so working with our Department of Natural Resources and our local waste management companies, we always expect and suggest that there's a level of um, control and regulation around waste management, and that applies both to trash recycling and compost, and also wastewater and sewer management.
No, that all makes sense. And that's I feel like a good way to think about it. Of like we've got to be good stewards of the industry. Like it's not like we can just hide and like that's sort of gone, right?
Right.
And now,
And
yeah,
and that's like the basis of forming any type of community is you need to kind of define who's in and who's out. And we are not afraid of saying who's not a part of our community are vacation rental operators who don't care about safety, who don't care about disturbing their neighbors, who allow those parties to happen, who allow their guests to mismanage their waste and create problematic interactions with wildlife. Like these are the boundaries that we've drawn as an association and as our board of directors over time to say, this is who we are and represent. And you're either going to say, yes, I agree, I'm in on this, or not. And so we really do need to, like within any industry, need to define kind of the responsible actors from those who don't want to play by the rules.
Yeah. No, I was chatting with someone at an advocacy meeting. I won't say the city because it might sort of out them, but he was sort of saying, he's like, I was the problem. I had 30 homes. They're luxury properties that we're like, I was essentially like turning a blind eye. They were throwing massive parties. We were like, neighbors hated us. He's like, but I was making a lot of money. And what I realized is like what a terrible impact I was having on like my ability to run this as a business long term, and like needed to make a change and sort of move from the dark side to the light side and like start advocating and like knowing what were the bad things happening because he was doing it, and then what could be done to like make sure or at least advocate for responsible sort of hosting and rental management.
Absolutely. And I do not assume that there's anybody out there who is intentionally causing problems in their community. But it is a level of awareness and care and education. And so yeah, I think that's what we need to do as a community at large is hold each other accountable and responsible for good behaviors. And so, if you're a vacation rental owner and you see somebody else maybe who could be sparking a community problem, that's how regulations start. Just with one event, one bad neighbor experience can turn into a townwide, ban or cap on vacation rentals. And so we all have to hold each other accountable for to be on our best behavior.
Yeah. So I know you've sort of taken your advocacy now beyond Vermont. So we served together on the Vermont Government Affairs Council. I know you were instrumental in sort of the Right to Rent collaborative. So where do you see this going in terms of advocacy, and like where would you like to see it go? Let's say by the end of 2026.
Yeah. What I've learned and is that these communities, these associations for the vacation rental community, at almost all local levels, state levels, national levels, they're just essential and they need to be sustainable and exist in perpetuity. Like they're not going anywhere. As long as the vacation rental industry exists, we need to have associations to not only represent their interests in the daily political conversations and in the media, we need constant professional development, education, and that network within ourselves, that social interaction to again to stay informed and to hold each other accountable. And so my involvement with VRMA and government affairs is absolutely to keep an eye on and help direct the national view for the industry. But more recently, with the Right to Rent Collaborative, this is an initiative to really propel a sustainable existence of associations everywhere. Right now we're still in the early days. Not every state has a vacation rental association. Not every community has organized, and so the Right to Rent Collaborative is a organization whose mission is solely focused on funding the startup and acceleration of associations at the state and local level. And so we've been partnering with a lot of different stakeholders. Again, the model is everybody in, everybody in. If you're receiving from this industry, we need you to be putting back into it. And this is the best way you can, is through funding and sustaining associations across the country. And so where I want to see this going is when we get to a place where we have 50 state associations that are fully staffed and sustainably funded, with everybody's help in the industry. Anybody who takes and receives, we want to see them giving back proportionally. And so that way we can build just a permanent infrastructure of community, of advocacy, and of education.
No, that makes sense. And then what are like if someone's listening, they're like, all right, Julie, I'm on board. You convinced me. Like, what would you recommend for the first steps of someone who wants to get organized, wants to build a community, maybe if and even just a small sort of local community, not necessarily ready to yet to jump into state level advocacy? Like, what are those first steps?
Yeah, so I've talked to a lot of people over the years about starting their own association where they are, which is super exciting. The first thing I always do is connect them with Rent Responsibly. They've just become the go-to resource for starting an association, and they can assist with everything from setting up bylaws to organizing a board, things that we kind of built from scratch 5, 10 years ago that now are people don't need to do anymore. So there are some great resources and templates and kind of like pre-built packages almost to start your association. And then the Right to Rent Collaborative will will be there to help reimburse those startup funds. Um, so it's certainly connecting with groups like that and other community leaders, maybe who you are inspired by, who can help be that guide. I mean, the other recommendation I always give people is to start to connect with your other local operators, whether that's through just starting a Facebook group or putting an ad out in your local paper to bring people together for some in-person community event or even a virtual meetup, as a good way to start building that network, collecting those contacts so that once you do get something rolling, you have your early adopters there standing by, waiting and ready to support you.
So don't just start picketing in front of the state house.
No, no, you'll get much further, making friends than adversaries.
So, Julie, it seems like you do a ton. Like you've got your business of like managing, running short-term rentals. Like you're leading statewide organizations. You're sort of collaborating on these national organizations now. Like, how do you just still stay so energized in this, avoid burnout, like when it can feel like advocacy is like a constant sort of uphill battle?
Yeah, whew, well, getting personal, I like it. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's, um, in the early days, I remember reaching out to one woman who I really thought she was gonna be all on board with me, and I said, "Let's start this organization," and she was like, "No, that's a full-time job. I already have a full-time job."
Yeah.
Um, and in hindsight, man, she knew what she was talking about because it is. It's a full-time job, and, I have to credit a lot of my energy and my balance, or being able to find balance to my incredible partner, Chris, who is just the most supportive husband that I could ask for, and so I'm very fortunate to have such a strong network and support system to remind me to take care of myself as well and to rest and recharge. I also have learned to really take time to invest in myself every year, in one way or another, whether it's going to a conference, going on a retreat, taking a new course, something to really invest in myself, continues to kind of like help me reset, give me more energy, give me more fuel. Um, but two, just the people, I think my members, the people who are part of my association give me energy. Um, you know, these conversations give me energy. Uh, this is just such an amazing network. I mean, yeah, so people ask me, or I was asked recently, like, why do you care so much about this? It was a really good question because I didn't really know how to answer that. I was like, I don't know. um, I think, it started as self-preservation for my business, but now I think it's really about just the people, the amazing people I've met along the way and the relationships I built. And um, it's, yeah, that I definitely derive a lot of energy from that.
Yeah. No, and the work you've done has been amazing, and it's been so helpful to the industry. I know people I've talked to are, and one of the comments was like, "How do we recreate another 50 Julie Marks around the country?" We'd all be better off for it as an industry. Um, so, and amazing work that you've been doing. If there's sort of one takeaway that you would love for someone to get from this conversation of sort of what and your mission is, and what would that be?
It would be to get involved in some way. And there are so many different levels of involvement. Even if all you can do is pitch in a couple of bucks a month to your state association or to the Right Trend Collaborative to support us all, that's involvement. That's You're doing your part. If you can do more, financially, then do that. If you have the bandwidth, the energy, the time to invest yourself, do that. We need more people, more bodies at the table, in the room. We need more voices out there. And so there's so much work to be done. We just are looking for everybody to contribute just a little bit. And that, collectively will really make a big difference. So get involved in any small or medium or big way that you can.
No, that's a great takeaway. And for those who would want to reach out or learn more about you or and the organizations you're part of, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, well, we're online.
You got a
VT
website?
Yeah, we got lots of websites. VT VTSTRA.org is VSTRA. Um, and my contact information is all up there. And then the Right Trend Collaborative, also online, is R2, number two, r2rcollaborative.org. And so that is, again, being recently launched. Actually, I think I'm a little early, not being launched for another couple of weeks officially, but sneak preview. You can learn more about what we're doing there and watch us roll out this new and exciting opportunity.
Awesome. Well, Julie, thanks so much for joining today.
Of course, absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for recharging my battery.
Great. Thanks.